Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to decode a seriously dense, absolutely revolutionary philosophical masterpiece. One that, honestly, is going to fundamentally change how you view your physical surroundings from this moment forward. We're diving into Henri Lefebvre's groundbreaking work, The Production of Space. Because, if you've ever felt like the city you live in is secretly trying to dictate how you behave, or if you've ever wondered why certain buildings just make you feel a specific way, well, you're actually already tapping into Lefebvre's core idea. Okay, so here is our roadmap for today. 1. The myth of empty space. 2. The two illusions. 3. Space is a social product. 4. The spatial triad. And finally, 5. The history of space. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The myth of empty space. We are kicking things off by totally shattering a fundamental assumption you probably hold about the very nature of reality itself. I want you to do me a favor. Look around the room you are sitting in right now. Seriously, really look at the walls, notice the distance between you and the door, and ask yourself, what actually is this environment? Is it just an empty void that was sitting there waiting to be filled up with furniture and people? Is it just some invisible mathematical grid? For centuries, following thinkers like Descartes, we have basically treated space as a traditional Euclidean container. Just a boring, empty, natural box waiting to be filled up. But Lefebvre drops a massive plot twist here. He says, no, space is a dynamic social product. It isn't just where things happen, it is actively manufactured by society, much like any commodity you'd buy at the store. That brings us to section 2, the two illusions. Now, if space is actively produced by society, why do we constantly fail to see this giant manufacturing process happening right in front of us? Well, Lefebvre says we're blinded by two specific traps. The first trap we fall into is what he calls the illusion of transparency. This is the totally false belief that space is perfectly clear, luminous, and completely innocent. It's the trap of thinking that space is just this mental realm where our thoughts and communications easily take shape with zero hidden agendas. We look at a city layout and think, yes, this makes perfect logical sense, assuming that any problems can be fixed simply by better communication. And then, the second trap is the exact opposite. He calls it the realistic illusion. Here, we fall into a naive naturalism, where we mistakenly believe space is just raw, substantial physical matter. We just see wood, concrete, and dirt. But by viewing space as merely natural, we are completely masking the massive historical and social forces that actually arrange that concrete and dirt in the first place. These two illusions kind of bounce off each other, constantly hiding the truth from us. All right, section 3, space is a social product. Let's see what happens when we break free of those illusions and get to Lefebvre's truly revolutionary core thesis. His crucial takeaway is right here. Social space is a social product. Space actually has a reality of its own. It's totally distinct from the commodities you buy or the money sitting in your bank account, but it is produced just the same. A society doesn't just exist inside of space, it literally secretes its own space. And the implications of this are wild. Because space is produced, natural untouched wilderness is essentially disappearing. It's becoming a myth, or really just raw material for our social systems to use. Every single society, every mode of production, creates its own entirely unique spatial footprint. But here's the absolute most vital takeaway. Space is not a neutral backdrop. It operates as a tool. Lefebvre argues that it serves as a powerful means of control and political domination for the ruling class, even if the state often fails to master it completely and resistance bubbles underneath. Which leads us to section 4, the spatial triad. To understand exactly how a society manufactures its reality, we need to look under the hood and break down Lefebvre's core framework. The first dimension of this triad is spatial practice, or the perceived. Think of this as your daily, on-the-ground life. It's the physical routes you take every single day, your morning commute, the network of roads linking your office to your apartment and then to the grocery store. It is the perceived, everyday reality of navigating a modern environment. Basically, it's what you actually do in space. Next up, we have representations of space, or the conceived. Now, this is the intellectual, top-down view. It's the space of the scientists, the urban planners, the architects, and the social engineers. We're talking blueprints, maps, rigid zoning codes, and mathematical models drawn up in some office to organize society. According to Lefebvre, this is the dominant space in any society. It is right where power and knowledge intersect. The third and final dimension is representational spaces, or the lived. This is the underground, passively experienced space of the inhabitants. It's the space of artists, writers, and your own childhood memories. The lived space overlays the physical environment with complex imaginations, hidden symbols, and raw passion. Think of the spooky feeling of a dark alleyway or the sacred atmosphere of a local graveyard. It's fluid, it's dynamic, and it constantly defies the strict, boring logic of those urban planners. When you put these three side by side, it's like a giant puzzle coming together. You have the daily routines we perceive, the intellectual blueprints the state conceives, and the symbolic, imaginative realms we actually live. Lefebvre argues that when these three align, you get a cohesive, functioning society. But when the planner's conceived space tries to crush the lived space of the inhabitants, that's when you get serious friction and social conflict. Now for our final stop, Section 5, the history of space. Because if space is produced, that means it actually has a history. Let's look at how this production has evolved. Following this historical thread, Lefebvre maps out a truly massive shift. Back in the ancient era, we had what he calls absolute space, built around sacred, natural sites, religious temples, and bloodlines. Then, between the 16th and 19th centuries, society shifted to historical space, which was defined by classical perspective, the strict geometry of the Renaissance city, and a very clear divide between town and country. But then, right around 1910, that old spatial code was completely shattered. We entered our current era of abstract space, driven by modern capitalism, heavy state control, and the total fragmentation of our daily lives. Let's look a little closer at this modern abstract space, because it's absolutely crucial for us today. The modern state consolidates its power on a global scale through rational planning. Technocrats impose identical, homologous measures across entirely different societies, literally using space as a weapon to crush time and neutralize resistance. Unique differences are flattened out into neat, self-regulating zones. But, and this is a big but, Lefebvre notes that the state-imposed normality inevitably provokes intense opposition. Subversion and what he dramatically calls tragic negativity constantly bubble up right beneath those perfectly planned urban grids. It all culminates in this incredibly powerful thought from Lefebvre. The state crushes time by reducing differences to repetitions. The ultimate takeaway here, space is never, ever neutral. It is an active, living instrument used by ruling powers to maintain cohesion and force everything to stay in its assigned place. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a real challenge. Look around your room one last time. Think about the roads right outside your window, the invisible zoning laws governing your neighborhood, and the exact distance you have to travel to your workplace. Ask yourself, how did power, planning, and history build the invisible architecture that governs your everyday life? Honestly, who produced the space you are sitting in right now? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning the space around you.